From losing his life almost as a baby and almost losing his ability to walk altogether and dealing with the racial segregation of his era, Oscar Robertson has had to face a lot of adversity, and the people who have kept him going through all of that have been his family, no doubt. So how did they manage to correct a foot deformity that would have led to the previously mentioned losing the ability to walk, and how did they keep him at the top of his game as a basketball competitor? Well, the answer may surprise you. Oscar Robertson was born in a small farmhouse to Bailey and Mazell Robertson in the deeply racially segregated South in Charlotte, Tennessee. He was born on Thanksgiving Day in 1938, but while it seemed like the family would enjoy their Thanksgiving more than anyone else that day, their day unfortunately went from a joyful one to a dire one. Oscar was born terribly sick and he looked like he was going to die. Fortunately, he started to show signs of surviving, but as his family breathed a sigh of relief, tragedy almost struck again. There was a sign that his left foot was going to suffer a deformity, and if it weren't for his mother and grandfather, he may have never played basketball. So what was it that they actually did to save his foot? Well, before we get there, let's meet his father first. Bailey Robertson is from Bellsburg, which is a small community in Tennessee. He was born to Lonnie Collier and Ed Robertson. Ed was a well-known man in town because he was the minister at Mount Zion African Methodist Church, and Bailey and his other siblings used to accompany him to his preachings until his death. This led Bailey to live with his aunt Ever Robertson because his mother had separated from Ed before his passing. As a result of this, Bailey took Aunt Ever as his mom, even going as far as thinking she was his actual mom. But eventually he would go back to live with his own family in Bellsburg, and there Bailey started working full-time at a very young age. He worked with his family at a tobacco and corn farm, and someday he would of course meet his wife, the mother of Oscar, Mazell Bell. However, Oscar in his autobiography, The Big O, My Life, My Times, My Game, said he wasn't exactly sure how his parents met, but if he were to take a guess, it would probably be church since their families both attended Mount Zion. And seeing their routine was the same, time with family, time at the farms, and time at church, it would make sense that when they were out in church, they kicked off a relationship since that was the only place they had a social life. Anyway, after they married, they moved into Mazell's parents' home in North Dixon County on State Highway 29. It was from there Bailey would continue to go to work and earn a living. Nevertheless, as manual labor was gradually replaced by machines like tractors, Bailey began making a 25-mile trip up to Nashville to find work. This continued until another one of his aunts named Inez helped him secure a job in a defense plant in Indianapolis in 1942. Bailey lived alone with Inez for months until his wife Mazell brought their 3 kids, including 4-year-old Oscar, to join him up in Indianapolis. But with his family finally with him, he knew he had to find them a personal house. A quiet, strict, but hard-working man, Bailey soon moved his family to a small shack on Colton Street, which was in a small neighborhood. This house by any stretch was not the nicest, but it provided them a roof over their heads, even though the bare necessities needed were still lacking. Their house had a toilet outside, a roof made of tar paper, the windows weren't strong enough, and during winter, they tried with all their might to keep the cold in check. And on top of all that, they were steeped in severe racial discrimination, which was unfortunately very common at the time. Bailey worked several jobs, including one as a meat cutter at King & Company, but it was never enough to put a balanced diet on everyone's table. Nevertheless, he and his wife ensured that their kids never felt poor, and despite his busy schedule, Oscar recalls how he would always help with their housework and emphasize the value of education to them. Unfortunately, Bailey and his wife would divorce when Oscar was only 11 years old, but the craziest part was that after the divorce, they kept it as a secret and actually continued to live in the same house and even sleep in the same bed. It wasn't until Oscar was in high school that he even knew about the divorce. Bailey later remarried a woman named Iwara Helms, and that was when he stopped living with his original family. Bailey was still around for Oscar, and Oscar admitted that he supported them with little he had, and besides, Bailey and his new wife lived very close to them on Kenward Boulevard while they stayed at 3454 Boulevard Place. It was also in the alley in his father's house that Oscar would construct his first basketball hoop and practice to become the great basketball player he would of course end up being. His father also tried to provide emotional support to him. He was the person he ran to when he felt down, and there was an instance when, after his high school team won a championship in Indianapolis, he confided in his father about the racism he and his teammates had to face. So even though everyone was celebrating their victory that day, he told his father, quote, "Dad, they don't want us." But even though he shared a great relationship with his dad, Bailey didn't have much influence over Oscar. But someone who did was Mazell Bell, who was the mother of Big O. Mazell Bell was born to Oscar's maternal grandparents, who were called Papa and Mama Pearl by some who knew them. They lived in northern Dixon County in a modest farmhouse on State Highway 29, and when Oscar's parents got married, this was where they moved in to stay and raise all their children, including the NBA legend. When Oscar was born, his left foot was massaged constantly by Mazell and Papa Pearl every day for the first week of his birth. This was the only way they thought they could prevent Oscar's foot from becoming deformed. Fortunately for everyone, it actually worked. In his autobiography, Oscar described his mom as, quote, "very strict and stern, very bossy, a strong country woman. She sang gospel in the church, was always quick with an opinion, and was a very good cook," end quote. She raised them in the way of the Lord, teaching them the Bible in the simplest way possible. After the divorce, she was forced to keep. She worked during the day as a beautician, and at night she worked part-time as a cook. It was from the family she cooked for she first saw a basketball that one of the children in the house threw away in the trash. She picked up this mangled ball and took it to her son Oscar, and that trash would go on to become a treasure for sure. But as influential as Oscar's mom was in his life, she didn't influence his decisions in life, including where he wanted to go to college. Many believe that the recruiter Walter Paul, who got Oscar to play college basketball at the University of Cincinnati, was because of his mother. It is true that Mazell did give Paul some conditions for her son's recruitment. For one, she played one of her gospel songs to Paul and demanded two things from him. She wanted him to play the tune to someone influential that can get it published for her. And secondly, she wanted him to have it played on a show called the 50/50 Club, and he delivered on all of her requests. But at the end of the day, it still came down to Oscar accepting to play for Cincinnati, and he had chosen to go there because he liked Paul and the people affiliated with the university that Paul had introduced him to. He recalls that they were kind and cared about his life seemingly, and not just the fact that he was a basketball prodigy. Besides, Paul also promised to get him a job where he could be in school for 14 weeks and work for the next 14 weeks. He also delivered on that promise. While Oscar was making a name in college, his mother fell ill, was hospitalized, and taken through surgery. This was a particularly tough period for Oscar, who was furious that he couldn't help his mom pay the hospital bills, and because of this, she had to go back to work without recovering from her surgery. Oscar was even angrier knowing that he didn't have money while people made so much off of him in college. But when Oscar finally did become a pro, everything changed. His first annual salary with the Cincinnati Royals was $33,000 plus a certain percentage coming in from gate receipts, which brought his total earnings to around $50,000. In today's time, this would be about $500,000, which is pretty good. Anyway, Oscar went ahead and paid off all of his mom's debt so she could focus on her passion, which of course was singing. She continued writing and performing gospel music throughout her life and even managed to sing at a sold-out show at Madison Square Garden with the Beck Jubilee crew. Man, isn't it nice to hear about people following their dreams and having everything work out for them? Well, unfortunately, somebody in Oscar's life who didn't have that happen to them really was his brother, who, despite having a interesting life nonetheless, did not manage to make a mark on basketball in the way that Oscar did. Oscar has just two siblings, his elder brothers Bailey Jr. and Henry, and they did practically everything together, from playing basketball and baseball, to listening to the radio, to doing house chores and homework together. While not much is known or recorded about Henry, Bailey Jr. is an entirely different story, and a whole book probably could be written for his own basketball struggles. Bailey Jr. was the firstborn of their parents, and according to Oscar, he was an exceptional basketball player who was nicknamed Flap. He got the name Flap because he had this exaggerated play to his game. When he shot the ball, he continued to wave or flap his hands after the ball had long left his hands. But that was his style. He added drama and fun to his game and was never scared to use his words on the court. Before Oscar made it to the high school team, Flap was the first person to grace the team in 1950 as a 5'9" sophomore. He started out as a bench warmer, but soon graduated into a local star in the Indianapolis area. One notable event that made Flap popular, however, happened during the 1951 regional semi-state finals between the Crispus-Attucks Tigers, which is his team, and the Anderson Indians. The Tigers were trailing by 10 points with only 4.5 minutes remaining when Flap was introduced into the game. He started by sinking his first shot and cutting the lead to 8. The Tigers were hopeful again, and with that hope they rallied back, almost tying the game. But with 7 seconds left, they were still down by 1 point. It was almost over. But Flap still had a point to prove, and he did, scoring the final 2 points to put the Tigers up 81-80 to win the game. Oscar recalls in his book that this was one of the happiest days in his life, and his eldest brother would later tell him something crazy, stating, "People told me their relatives died of heart attacks. One lady said when the ball went through that hoop, she started to go into labor." End quote. It was also a game that changed Oscar, as he recalls never being the same again after his brother's last shot. Even though the Tigers didn't win their next game, his love for basketball had just then reached an all-time high, and he would never let that go. Flap graduated in '53, and Oscar was given his jersey number 43, but aside from inheriting his brother's jersey, he was also regarded as Lil Flap. Anyway, the original Flap had a scholarship to go to Indiana Central College, which is known as the University of Indianapolis today. His 4-year college career saw him set the record for the highest number of points scored, with 2,268 at the time. But he still remains number 1 in points average with 23.2 points per game. He was also the team's MVP for 3 consecutive seasons, and in 1990 he was inducted into the University of Indianapolis Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, he never made it to the NBA, partially because even though the Syracuse Nationals, or the 76ers of today, drafted him, the quota system prevented him from playing. He would then play for the Harlem Globetrotters and later in Germany with a special service army unit. He died in 1994, but the exact cause of his death is not known. Well, now it's time for what I think is probably like the most popular segment of each of our videos, and that's about the women of his life. And other than his mother, there were 4 women who made a huge impact on his life. And that was, of course, his wife and daughters. They gave color to his life, so much so that in his autobiography on the dedications page, he said this: "To the one true love of my life and my friend, my wife Yvonne, who has been a tremendous beacon for me to grow culturally and intellectually. To my daughters Shayna, Tia, and Mari, I deeply appreciate being your father." I mean, that dedication pretty much summarizes what these people mean to Oscar, but let's meet them and the daughter that Oscar saved by donating a kidney to. But first, his wife Yvonne. Yvonne Crittenden was born in Montgomery, Alabama, but the exact year this happened wasn't stated in Oscar's autobiography or anywhere else we could find. Her father was a middle-class businessman, and she had 3 other younger siblings. Oscar described her in his book as, quote, "Yvonne is intelligent and gorgeous, as well as being a talented artist and art collector, a pianist, and a voracious reader." They met while Oscar was attending the University of Cincinnati. She was an elementary school teacher in Cincinnati at the time and had already graduated in '56 from that same university. Oscar remembers not being able to talk much around her on their first date, a double date that also involved one of his friends named John. But they grew to love each other, and even while he was still in college, he asked her to marry him. The exact date they married also isn't known, but the marriage was held immediately after Oscar graduated college at Carmel Presbyterian Church. After their marriage, they went on a honeymoon in Rome, Italy, while Oscar was also playing in the 1960 Olympics. Then, after Oscar signed his first NBA deal, he purchased a house for them both in Avondale at 3604 Eaton Lane, which was in Cincinnati. They were a completely happy couple by all accounts, and Oscar had found his perfect half. But something was about to threaten this happiness. In 1965, she joined the marchers with Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, Alabama, and after the marchers had been attacked by police, Oscar had been really worried, but he was relieved to know that Yvonne had not been hurt. Yvonne was a strong and responsible woman. She was able to join the fight for social justice, work as a teacher, go to all the home games her husband played at, and raise 3 daughters all at the same time. Oscar also revealed that Yvonne used to cook for Bill Russell and the Celtics whenever they came to town. This kind of makes me wonder, what's with Bill Russell and eating at people's houses? Remember how he would used to go over to Wilt Chamberlain's family's house to eat? I don't know, man, maybe this is why he has so many rings. He would go to the people's houses and scrape out everything to get a better understanding of his opponents. Anyway, Oscar and Yvonne have both been together since and have 3 daughters, Shayna, Tia, and Mari, born in 60, 64, and 69 respectively. For a basketball legend, one might wonder if Oscar ever felt bad that he never had a son to maybe take on after him. Well, according to Oscar, he didn't really care that much, he just wanted to have kids that were healthy. Nevertheless, his daughters were drawn to sports, had sports discussions, and even played basketball and football with him. None of them ended up as professional athletes though. Not much is revealed about the girls, but there are some interesting things about Shayna and Tia. Shayna was born in 1960 on a day that is not exactly known, but Oscar said he was lucky to have been present during delivery. Where she had gone to school isn't really known either, but she had worked for one of her father's companies called Orchem. Nothing much was said about Shayna except that she has been a compatible donor for her sister Tia, but it was their father who ended up making that sacrifice. This is because, according to Oscar, he didn't want to have Shayna do it because she was just a kid herself. But what even led to Tia needing that donation in the first place? Well, Tia is the second daughter of Oscar, but unlike Shayna, Oscar had been away for the All-Star break in 1964 when she was born. She was 25 years old in 1989 when something tragic happened to her. Little marks like cracks or stars had begun to appear on her fingertips while she was working for the National Association of Securities Dealers in New York. Oscar said after that they saw a specialist and discovered she had lupus. He and his daughter were in tears as they called his wife from a hotel. Lupus is an autoimmune disease that basically fights the tissues and organs of the body itself. In 1994, it had become so bad that her kidneys started to fail. 2 years later, she was undergoing dialysis at her parents' house, but eventually the doctors knew Tia would need a kidney transplant if she was going to survive. Oscar was taken into a 6-hour surgery and came out with 1 kidney less. It didn't matter because he had just saved his daughter's life, and as much as the entire world saw him as a hero for doing this, he insisted he's not. He's simply just a father who would do anything to see his kid healthy and alive. As for Oscar's younger daughter, not much is known about her. So Oscar's family definitely helped propel him to stardom, but you know who else got propelled by his family? Bill Russell. So why don't you check out that video next, because if you like this video, you're definitely gonna like that one. Thank you.